one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And roll call, please.
Counsel Perry,
Present.
Counsel Hilton,
Present.
Counsel Katz,
Present.
Counsel Cook, Counsel Driggs,
Present.
Counsel Coulter is absent, and Counsel DeMadeira is on her way.
Okay, so we'll start with our consent agenda. We have the approval of several meetings, a special session on February 4th, a special session on February 6th, an executive session on February 6th, a regular session on February 11th, an executive session on February 11th, a special council meeting on the 19th. I should note that the first one, February 4th, the date on the minutes themselves is January 4th, so we're just going to correct that. There's no need to take that off the consent agenda. For consent agenda, item 2, receipt of minutes from the following boards. The Budget Committee, Pecasset Hill Cemetery Commission, 2018 Annual Report, Open Space and Land Preservation Commission. And as far as correspondence, we have a letter from Mayor Jamie Bova of the City of Newport inviting us to join the 63rd Annual St. Patrick's Day Parade on the 16th of March. Item 4 is Town Administrator Department Monthly Reports. 5 is Town Administrator Police and Fire Overtime Reports for January. 6 is Approval of Tax Assessor Abatements. 7 is Treasurer Denise Surratt's January Monthly Budget and Revenue Reports. And that's the extent of the consent agenda. Would anybody like to remove anything from that?
Mr. President, I'd like to remove CA1F. And I don't know if CA7 was just a date correction. I don't know if I can just indicate that on the front of,
Oh, well, we can pull it off.
okay.
Any other items to remove from the consent agenda for discussion?
Well, not that it needs to be removed, but for the 19th February, it says 10:15 in the morning, it's supposed to be 7 p.m.
I think we can probably correct that.
Yeah.
To remove that if we're gonna correct it. We need to remove that if we're gonna correct it.
Oh, do I? Okay.
Yes.
Well, okay, it's removed.
It's, I think,
Yeah, that's already removed. Okay, any other items?
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah,
Could I have a motion to approve the
I did.
consent agenda except for CA1F and CA7?
So moved.
Have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All right, all in favor? It's unanimous. Counselor Jiggs, CA1F.
Yes, so on the first page, discussion and possible votes on fiscal year budget, it states that Councilor Driggs had concern with the OPEB liability and suggested an OPEB trust fund should be established. I did have concerns with the OPEB liability, but the second part of the phrase, I think the minutes will show it ended up evolving into a discussion about trust funds. I don't think I didn't recommend or suggest one.
Okay.
And you had the time or something. You had the time.
And now do I tell you about the time? Okay. It's supposed to be 7 p.m., not 10:15, which I told you. Okay.
Well, Counselor Jiggs, do you have any suggested amendments to the minutes to reflect your?
I would just suggest that it reads that Councilor Driggs had concern with the OPEB liability and the amount being asked for us to contribute, which evolved into a discussion about how to establish a fund and whether we wanted to belong to the interlocal trust. It opened up a general discussion about funds, so I don't know how to.
Did the clerk catch that?
she didn't,
Yes, it's on the tape.
Okay. accept this with those items amended?
Change,
Yeah, I will move to accept that, with
change.
the change made.
Any second?
Second.
Okay, any discussion? All right, hearing none, I'll call for a vote, show of hands, to approve CA1.
I abstain, I wasn't present for this meeting.
So that's 5 approve and 1 abstention.
Last week.
Right, now brings us to CA7.
So in reviewing the package for tonight, the treasurer's report indicates a casino revenue through January 2018, which I had a feeling was wrong. So I checked, and it should be January 2019.
Okay, well, I'm not, we're just receiving this, so I'm not sure we have any role in
Okay,
editing it.
right.
But
Pass it on.
we can make sure it's correct our own
I did
copies.
talk to the, yeah, okay. It's mostly just to tell the council.
Okay, so would you like to move to accept
Rec-
CA7?
Receive it, yes.
And do I have a second?
I'll second it.
All right, any discussion on CA7? Hearing none, all in favor of approving? Okay, it's unanimous. And that moves us to the open public forum. I have signed up two names, but one of whom is on the agenda. So I think what we'll do is we'll take the 2 that are listed on the agenda prior to the one who signed up independently this evening, and then we'll hear from that person, who I have to apologize in advance, I can't read the handwriting, so you probably know who you are, so, okay. So first would be Rosemary Bowers, Secretary of the Tiverton Lions Club, with an invitation to town council and public to attend the 6th Annual Recognition Night, Saturday, March 9th at 6 p.m. at McGovern's on the Water, 310 Shove Street in Fall River, Massachusetts.
Yes, good evening. I've been a member of the Tiverton Lions now for over 20 years. And we started, this will be the 6th, so 5 years ago, we reached out to try to figure out how we could help recognize the people who serve our community, because as Lions, we serve. There was nothing in the town anywhere that we could find that they really reached out to the people who serve us. So we decided to set up our recognition night where we honor a teacher from every school, a policeman, and a fireman. And these are people who serve us, the teachers who educate your children, your grandchildren, the firemen who come when you need assistance, the police who are there to help you. And there's nothing that goes on in the town to turn around and say back to them, thank you for what you do for us. So we are extending, and I will leave some flyers here, and again, if anyone in the audience would like to take some. It's our 6th annual recognition night. It's going to be at McGovern's, coming up on March 9th. And we have hot past hors d'oeuvres. It's a very wonderful night. Representative Edwards presents citations from the governor to each of the honorees. Plus, we give each of them plaques, and each one of them has an opportunity to get up and speak on their behalf, as well as the honorees themselves, the information that we've been given that we read prior to them coming up for their acceptance. So I would like to know, should I just leave this on the table? I was told the last time I was here, maybe they could take some in the office, or do you want me to come back tomorrow with them? It's easier? All right, because I'll grab some tickets, and then I've got some posters here. So we're extending the invitation. I mean, these are the people that help you. These are the people that help all of us. So we're asking you to please, bless you, to reach out and help us recognize for the wonderful works that they do in our community. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, and those flyers will be around, I gather, as well as tickets for sale this evening, I suppose. Next on the agenda is, for a public open forum, is a presentation regarding Bay Street neighborhood soil contamination by Bob Hoffman and Hoffman Engineering.
Excuse me, I think you had another person signed up.
When you couldn't read.
Right, well, I was gonna take the people who are on the agenda first, but if this is gonna be
Oh,
lengthy,
I'm sorry.
I mean,
Well,
Yeah, you want to get him done with it, you can.
Sure.
I think that'd be
It'll be
better.
more expedient.
Quicker for him.
Is it Alex? I can read it.
Good evening, folks. I have a problem and a suggestion that's going to help other people, I hope, in time. I believe after you hit 91-year-old or 90-year-old, which I am, I think my taxes should be frozen.
Should be what?
It's going to make my life a lot easier than paying somebody to come in and shove your driveway, $25 here, $25 there. It adds up, you know. And it's hard for me to make ends meet, but I'm making ends meet. But I like to have a little easier in life before I die. I lost a father and a brother in the war, okay? I think I paid my fair share, so I think my country should owe me a little bit more. The VA is helping me out a lot. Now I hope the heck these people can help me too. And I just found out that you have to make out your papers to lower your taxes, okay? I think for the last 65 years I never wrote one out. Today's my second one or first one I ever wrote out. So that's all I have to say. But thank you, sir, for helping me out. I couldn't have done without you. Thank you, folks.
Thank
Good
you.
night.
Thank you.
Okay, now we'll move on to the presentation regarding Bay Street neighborhood and soil contamination by Bob Hoffman and Hoffman Engineering.
Good evening. I'm Bob Hoffman with Hoffman Engineering. I started on this project on behalf of the town back in 2007. As a point of introduction, and they can introduce themselves. We got Paul from the North Tiverton Fire and Water District, and Leroy from the Sewer District. So I know most of you have probably followed this, if nothing else, in the news, but essentially back in 2002, when they were putting in the interceptor down Bay Street, they uncovered blue soil, and at that point, an investigation started throughout this whole area, this neighborhood, and that is kind of what led us to today, and it's been a long, long haul for the residents of that neighborhood. If we could go through the slides, I just want to show you some examples and make sure everybody's familiar with the areas of not only the roadways, the town roadways we're talking about, but also the area that's been remediated.
Bob, can I interrupt just a second?
Yep.
You have handouts, and they include copies of each slide,
Right.
just so that you know, as well as a copy of the outline of the presentation.
Right.
And one thing I had wanted to say at the beginning is that I asked for this presentation because of the budget requests and the fact that the Bay Street area is featured in the capital budget request, and that I thought it would be helpful to get a quick update on the history and the background of this whole situation. But more importantly, perhaps for tonight, really focusing on what are we talking about in terms of the town's responsibilities and the potential costs associated with that.
So this area that's on, I gotta get over to the, this area that's on this slide, here's the Massachusetts line, this is State Avenue, and we essentially go down Church Street, which starts here, down to Judson, down Bay, and then eventually Foot Street cuts, this is Foot Street cuts over. So it's this neighborhood that had the original moratorium on it that was set by the town council because there was contamination found when they brought the interceptor from the old Coachman restaurant down the railroad track and down Bay Street to tie into the Fall River sewer treatment plant lines, and this is Fall River here. So that kind of gives you an idea of where this neighborhood is. On the handout, Fall River Gas, which is suspected, maybe not admittedly from them, the source of the contamination is if you follow Bay Street, and I have it on the handout, up Bay Street. It's up near the Gold Medal Bakery, and that was the source of the coal gasification waste that was dumped throughout the neighborhood and on the roadways.
What kind of waste? I'm sorry.
Coal gasification. So when you made coal back in the 20s, 30s, well, actually it started in the late 1800s. When you make gas from coal, you purify it through wood chips, for instance. That takes out a lot of the sulfur and the cyanide. When that stuff gets spent, some of that was dumped in the neighborhood, and it has a very, very light, very beautiful blue, actually, cyanide material that's in it. It's not leachable. It's technically not toxic because it's bound with iron, but that's the kind of waste you have, that and a lot of metals and a lot of ash. So unfortunately, one of the people that worked there also did a lot of work for the town. So when he cleaned out those purifier boxes, he would haul and use it under the roads, on private property down there. He actually lived, that was Simpson, he lived in this house right up here, right on the state line. It kind of got a turret on the house. The house is still there. And he contaminated all his own lot and used it throughout the neighborhood, not only along the drainage lines and so forth. So it's under the road. Some places it's merely ash and cinders, but other places it's the purifier waste. So that was the major source of the contamination. When we got involved in 2007, we did test pits representing the town against the gas company. The town filed suit against Southern Union at the time. They countersued the town because the town had used that same contractor. There was a bunch of other side suits against the gas company that had an explosion of the gas tanks down there, Firestone, because they had a fire in Fall River. They thought they brought stuff here. And all these side suits, and the residents filed suit against Southern Union. The other source of contamination that's been difficult to deal with is right about here, right on the waterfront. Years ago, there was a hat factory. They made hats containing mercury. They cauterized the felt to make it stand up. A guy had a farm right along O'Connell Street, and he dumped hats and that felt material all under O'Connell Street, and it's very, very high in mercury. So that's the other contaminant we have in the neighborhood. And if you go through, let's go through some of the typical waste that we have. So this is, again, I'll come back to this. I have this on a board too. This is the restricted areas of the roadway. Again, it goes from Church, you project up to Methuen. So Church is right here. It doesn't go all the way through. Methuen comes off of the extension of State. So this is the easterly extent of the moratorium on the roads. Judson Street is the southern end. You go up Bay Street, and Bay Street eventually branches off into Foot. So Bay and Foot, and here's State Avenue that goes up here and terminates right beyond Bottom. So this is the neighborhood that we have the material under the roads. We have an RIDEM, which I'll explain, restriction on the roads and digging by any of the utility companies or by the Tiverton Department of Public Works. So again, if we look at the next slide, so this is typical of one of the times we got a call at the time from Steve Berlucci. This is the failed drainage line that cut across at Chase and Bottom. You can see some of the blue staining of the concrete and the rocks, and it also has a lot of orange material that is actually oxidized waste also. What happened in this particular case, over the decades it's been there, it actually ate away the concrete pipe. So we worked with the town. We disposed of the soil properly at Central Landfill, replaced it, and replaced the storm drain line. Next slide. This is some typical waste that we found along State Avenue. And again, as we were working with the town, they're also doing the remediation along the roadway. So this is in the green area of the roadway, we call it, which is the unpaved portion, but it's definitely part of the town's highway. And this is just typical waste, and it's very sporadic. You'll find some bricks and debris, and then you'll find nothing, and then there'll be more again. Next slide. These are the hats and the felt that on figure 5, that we found. So what we had to do there is the EPA found mercury felt on one of the nearby house lots. They did a cleanup in 2004. When we went doing the work with the neighborhood in 2012 or thereabouts, we found more mercury felt. We knew it was along the roadway, but it was on another lot. So the EPA came back, cleaned up that other lot, and they forced, under a consent agreement with the town, to clean up the green area of 8 Connell Street right away. So the town spent money out of some of the $550,000 they got from the settlement of the lawsuit, and cleaned up the mercury felt again along the green area, but not under the pavement. Again, the mercury, the nice thing is it doesn't leach, it doesn't volatilize under normal conditions, but it's really highly contaminated, like 43,000 ppm, and the standard is the number 23. So we cleaned up that with the town along 8 Connell Street. What's the next slide, please? So as this is a road, this is, for those of you familiar with the neighborhood, this is the paddock of Pat Aguirre's horse. As they cleaned up along here, part of the cleanup requirement for the neighborhood is if they had to extend to the roadway, they dug to the asphalt and then put down orange demarcation barrier, which simply signifies that they dug down to 2 feet and then backfilled, so that when the town comes back and digs along this roadway, or the water department, sewer department, they know it's been cleaned down to that demarcation barrier, and then it's dirty underneath that. So this, quite a bit of the right-of-way, of the green area of the right-of-way, was remediated in effect by the residents as part of the settlement. We're painfully preparing a plan now that outlines all those areas on the plat map for the for the DPW, water department, and the sewer authority, so they know what's been done as part of the remediation over the 7 years or so. The next slide. So, like I say, underneath the roadway, you have asphalt. In some area, they just keep adding it. So it's like up to 8 inches thick. There's the gas plant waste underneath it. In some places, it's up to 3 feet thick. Some places it's blue. Some places it's just normal ash. And because years ago, before they had asphalt, they would put ash and cinders on the road with a steamroller. That extends, in some cases, further out underneath the green areas. And then, but like this is a good example on Connecticut Street. We found that storm drain is put within the MGP waste, is right around the storm drain. So that's the problem. So even if you spent, and we'll talk about estimates, if you had $10.5 million to take all the asphalt out of those restricted roadways, dig the waste out, and put clean material back, you would still be stuck with the stuff that's around some storm drains. There may be stuff around water lines, because water lines are put in, it's intermixed, and catch basins and so forth. So, but the most of it is directly underneath the asphalt. So again, the lawsuit, we had a lot of closed door sessions, open door sessions throughout the whole process in the lawsuits in early 2009. Most of that happened. The residents sued. The gas company offered $11.5 million. The attorneys took about $3.5 million of it plus expenses, and that left money for the residents. Some of that was for the remediation. Other parts were for tort damages. As it turns out, the remedial contractor they were persuaded on hiring ended up going bankrupt. So then they stepped in. They actually hired our firm to finish it. They took money from the second payout of damages to the property, if you will, and essentially we used that to complete the project. As I'll show you in a little while, we're done with the remediation of the residential lots in the neighborhood. And since then, there's been numerous lawsuits, including ones against the insurance company from the previous contractor and so forth, and also insurance claims from, they had a cost cap policy and so forth. The final settlement, which I think, Nancy, I don't know if you had copies for everybody, but the settlement agreement, and we've got it, then there's a lot of attachments to it. The long story short is the town was given $550,000 out of the settlement. We have effectively, most of that was for at the time to do the green areas of O'Connell and Judson, because those two streets, for whatever reason, are the worst. O'Connell we know because of the Mercury. Judson Street, the lower portion of Judson Street where it meets Bay, which is again, it's right, it's right where you come down Judson, it goes on to Bay. That is the contamination is so bad there that the water department keeps having to replace their water lines because the pH tends to drop over time with this material, and it eats up the valving they have where it comes down the hill and transitions onto Bay. So that's one of the more problematic areas. It was nowhere near enough at the time. Even with some estimates of disposal, we were above $10.5 million. We had some legal experts come in, and the town council at the time was given the option, and frankly, the residents, we would still be litigating that right now, and the neighborhood wouldn't be cleaned up at all, because Southern Union had a lot of high-powered attorneys, and they didn't care because they put it in the rates. So whatever they pay for a law fee, they just put it in the rates, as they did the settlement. So, so they basically settled, and again, the town got a fraction with the approval that we could remediate as long as the town maintained the roads, the asphalt paving, and so forth, that we would remediate as needed be for construction and so forth, whether it be water lines, sewer lines, or storm drain lines. Again, the thing that definitely wasn't really part of that, but it was O'Connell Street was new as bad, and when we were doing work over there on behalf of the residents, we ran into the Mercury. EPA came in, but then they wanted the green area cleaned up, which it was down to 2 feet. So that's been done, which is good. So the approach of the residential lots, just to give everybody an idea, is Vanessa Hagen Breslin went out on behalf of the gas company, did like 2,500 borings, most of them for between 2 and 5 feet. The upper 2 feet's the most important because on a residential lot, they look at where that's you're exposed to it. If there was an exceedance in that one point, the remedial contractor dug a 10 by 10 square around that area. And then you test north, south, east, and west side walls and 2 at the bottom. If those failed, then you have to either go deeper or wider and continue. So the figure 8 that I gave you is actually, it's Pat Aguirre's house. And this just gives you an idea of how many data points that we had to finish this lot because the contractor, like I say, went bankrupt. But so you keep digging. Luckily, we had an XRF which we can test in the field. But to give you an idea, there was $75,000 worth of testing on that lot alone, and this is only the house lot, to get to an endpoint. So all those data points you see on there, on the figure 8, are all the final samples after everything was compliant. So then we had to write a report for each. So if you look at the lots, which is the next figure 8A, there is, this is the neighborhood, and again, there's 35, right? There's 35 environmental land usage restrictions, which are the orangish brown. And those lots, they had remediation on done, but they couldn't get to the end point, okay? So we dug down to 2 feet, put a demarcation barrier, whether it be orange fabric or orange snow fence, and then backfilled. So on the deed and recorded in the land evidence records are that on those lots, if they want to dig more than 2 feet in the future, they have to notify DEM. So the lots aren't clean, and there's really, frankly, I mean, I think total it was $4.5 million spent on remediation. You could easily spend that again if you had to clean everything out of the neighborhood. But it was a piecemeal approach, if you will, and that's how the attorneys that worked for the residents worked it out with DEM and so forth. On this same figure, you'll see there's the 4 yellow lots are commercial. They're non-jurisdictional. They weren't part of the cleanup. And then there's the blue lots were ones that had remediation done on them, and they don't have an ELUR. So all the blue lots, and then the lighter green lots are ones that had remediation, had investigation done, but in the few borings they did, they didn't find anything. So you can see the dark black line that runs along here. It runs right along Bottom Street and like this. So all the lots within this as part of the settlement agreement had to be tested other than the 4 commercial lots. So that's why you see these are all have a color to them. The ones outside of these, which was in the expanded area, went up to Church and then down to Leaps Road down here, those people had the right to have investigation if they wanted them, and in most cases, they didn't find anything, but in a few cases, they did, and it was either remediated or like this lot up here has a small ELUR on it because they couldn't get it all. So those are the remedial lots that were done. And like I say, we've completed everything. There's a couple more recordings we need to do. But other than that, and then what we're doing for the town, because you guys got to have the records forever, we're going to put everything on a hard drive because we got file cabinet drawers full of these reports. They're just amazing how many pages there are out of these. So that's the remediation. And there was about 43,500 tons of soil disposed of out of the neighborhood. And again, there's still environmental land use restrictions, so we didn't get it all. And but that's done. So what's not done, the roadways, and this is one other thing that the town council and the town needs to look at. So this is the playground on Hooper Street. This, for those of you old enough, this used to be a school, and I guess eventually it was burned or whatever. But the school, this playground, one of the first concerns with the town is it safe? This playground safe? And they did a lot of borings on here, and everything came out fine. So all the surface soil is fine on this town playground. In this one little area here, they had one boring that it should be feet, but at 2 to 4 feet in depth. So what they did is they again use these probes. The upper 2 feet was fine. At depth 2 to 4 feet, they found one exceedance. So what we need to do on this lot, we either have to put an ELUR on the lot, which is a land usage restriction, which would require the town, like we do with the roadways for the town, do an annual inspection and say the you know, the turf's all in good condition, nobody's done any work there and so forth, or we have to go back, find this area, and see if we can remediate it, and then get rid of the whole thing, so we wouldn't have that restriction. So those are the options on, this is the town lot, again, which used to be a school.
I just asked a question. How many borings were done on that lot? You only show the one that exceeded.
Oh, yeah,
How many
there were probably, between hand augers and so forth, at least 20 across the lot. So they did a bunch of them up here. This right here is like an asphalt, this is asphalt paved, if you will. But they did a bunch of them, all like rows of them here. So I don't know, Eli, do you have any idea? Yeah, I think there's 24, and then I think they came back and did some more shallow ones. So they did a lot of them. And they didn't find any, because the nice thing about it is, the school sat back here, the rest of this was a playground, and when they demoed the school, they brought in some pretty clean fill to, so my personal thing, this is just the ash or whatever from when the school burned. There's none of this waste here. What we found in this area of the whole neighborhood, on Judson Street right here, there is contamination in Judson Street here, but it's down about 14 feet. Because in the archives here, we found there used to be a dip in the road right here in Judson Street before it actually went through. And when they rebuilt it, they filled this by 14 feet. And so that's the fortunate thing. There's no contamination there. So this slide here basically shows a layer. Go ahead. Yeah, so this one showed, but before he gets on the sewers, I just want to say, so the long-term obligations for the town is, and we have it worked out, this map, and we've got to work on a way to, so it has some lasting ability, is an ELUR recorded on the roadway, because the roadways don't have plats on, so we can't put on the land evidence record, but we got to work with the assessor and Public Works so that basically forever they have a restriction on them. We got to maintain the pavement. We do an annual inspection. It's not a lot of money. It's like $500 to check all the roads, write up the report, come out and then meet with Public Works on what has to happen. We do training for the Public Works, the Sewer Authority and Water Department, again, so nobody goes out there and digs and takes soil off as being clean. And then, like I say, what Leroy is going to talk about is the sewer work and other work in the area, because when they do digging, we're not going to chase it, but within the trench box, after you cut the pavement, there's going to be that swath of contamination, and it only makes sense to get rid of it at that time. If there just happen to be water, sewer, and storm drainage line all done on a roadway, say you picked Hooper, then it would make sense to just get rid of all of it across the whole road, because you're not going to just patch those pavement, you're going to repave that road at that time. So that's basically the town's obligation in the foreseeable future.
So I just want to talk a little bit about the sewer part of this. Basically, most of all of these houses here have failed on-site systems. They're either old cesspools that have never been upgraded, or with the contamination and the digging and everything, the systems have been, they've been probably failed before then, but the digging and remediation didn't help. And so this green line that you see here is the sewer interceptor that exists right now. And all of the people that are abut this interceptor can be connected to it, so that they can, because really these lots are not really acceptable for any kind of an on-site system at this point. Right now, there's some of these houses that are tied into the storm drains, which means that the sewage is just going right into the bay, and the contamination through groundwater is leaching into the bay also. And so there's a cesspool act that is in force right now, that anybody within 200 feet of the water body needs to have a fully functioning septic system or be connected to sewer. Now, one of the things that's preventing all these people from being connected to sewer is that there's no laterals. Basically, the pipe that goes from the interceptor to their lot line is not there. And so one of the things that we need to do is we need to come up with a project that will get in there and put those laterals in. Now, the pipe itself would be borne by the people, the connections themselves. They have to pay to connect. However, the remediation of the extension of those pipes in the public space, in the public roadways, is the responsibility of the town. It's not the responsibility of the people because they don't own the street, the town owns the streets. So one of the things that we're looking for is that for the town to commit to spending the money to remediate the soil, basically get rid of the soil, and that'll allow us to have the sewer project that will extend the service laterals to the homes along this area, and the people would pay to, they would have from their property to their house, they would pay to have those extensions done. But that can't get done until the town takes care of getting that soil remediated so that we can extend it over to the town line. Now, all that being said, once you open up Foot Street and Bay Street and et cetera, then it makes sense to fix the drainage problems down there, which Bob indicates that there are many drainage problems along those roads. And Paul here with North Tiverton Fire District has water pipes that also need to be replaced because Bob mentioned earlier about the corrosion and the failing of the valves and that sort of thing. So in talking with Jan, we know that there's been money put into the capital budget for work in this
Budget
area.
request.
I'm sorry? A request. We're asking for that get approved so that we can go on and have the utilities fixed in that area. We're talking about sewer, water, and drainage. Now, right now, these people basically are, the drainage service is bad, there's no sewer, and issues with water. So, this next slide has the homes. It indicates the homes that would be connected along Foot Street and along Bay Street, so all these lots. Okay, yes. So, let me go back. The slide. So what you see in blue is what we've identified as future projects. We realize that this would be a multi-year, multifaceted situation to get that whole area put on sewer. So there's we're requesting that for 2020, we start by Bay Street, and then over a period of time, we would extend sewer up these other streets, Canonicus and Judson and Hooper, et cetera. And each year, we would have a project, and it would basically be a joint project between the town, which would theoretically deal with the pavement and the drainage. We would define a sewer project for that year, and then Paul and North Tiverton Fire would see if there's some water to accommodate it. So it would be a close working relationship between the three entities to service this area the way it should be serviced.
So you mentioned that a lot of these places have failed septic.
Yes.
So have they been given notices that they have to correct it by a certain time?
The EPA, the DEM has basically said that by 2020, everybody that's within 200 feet of the shoreline should be hooked up. It should either have an on-site system if it's available.
And the other matter is, the DEM took a hands-off approach during the remedial work because they had enough other things to worry about. But when I tell you this failing septic system, the DEM was out there when we were digging. There was so many that are tied into storm drains, And we didn't have a choice. DEM watched us. We disconnected it, dug the soil out, and reconnected it. So, and what is not shown on these plans is between Hooper and each street that goes off the side, Connell and Chase and so forth, there's a drain line that kind of runs between the plats. So there's a house here, back of the house is a drainage ditch. That's where a lot of the septic systems go. And then it ends up, like I say, those things just become an open sewer. They smell in the summertime, it's horrible. And because the water table, we have some monitoring wells that were actually put in by VHB. The water table on Connell Street right at the end is like 1.75 feet to water. So it's like, there's no way you can put a functioning septic system on these. And that's been the big problem. And it really bad, but DEM's not gonna let it go any longer because now the remediation's done, they want something done.
Right. So we're basically proposing a multi-year, well, we're talking about a multi-year project to get all the systems squared away here. So this is basically the end of our presentation. We're going to open it up to questions.
Can I ask a quick question? So I thought you had identified two priority areas. One was in the Bay and Cook Street area, and one was in another area?
Well, we had talked about
Where there
the
was,
Bay and Foot being a priority, but after further discussions with Bob and then Connell, there is not enough money in the budget or to deal with just Connell and Judson here. We're talking about probably $1 million worth of remediation that would have to be done. So for 2020, fiscal year 2020, we're talking about just trying to, with what Jan has put into the budget, just trying to get the laterals done for Foot Street and Bay Street.
And that's about 14, there's 3 vacant lots, but there'd be 14 services. I think 11 would be active and 3 other stubs along that Foot and Bay.
and the town's portion is only for the removal and disposal of the
Of the soil.
soils that are disturbed.
Right, so it'd be a trench box, so essentially you dig up that 6-foot wide swath and get rid of that upper 2 feet or thereabouts. And then after that, it'd be normal digging, and then the backfill for the bedding of the pipe and so forth would about equal the displacement of the soil that came out. So that would kind of be the approach. We did some rough ideas back when they were looking at this project originally, and it was right around the Foot and Bay Street for those 14 connections to the edge of the property line. The remediation was about, with today's disposal dollars, about $110,000.
And if I'm not mistaken, you did calculations of, you know, what it would cost in different
Right.
areas of.
Right. So we
of
did
this
a
large area.
calculation.
Hold on a second.
Yep.
We're going to hand those out, but you may not have time to go through each and every
Right.
one
I
of
just
them.
want to say in general.
But I do
what-
want to say about Bay Street.
Right,
There is an open question as to who owns Bay Street.
right.
And
Right.
that needs to be, you know, just recognized. Not that it necessarily decides for us what we need to do, but it's an important thing to consider, and we need to talk to DOT about.
I was
Right,
just
and
going
that-
to ask that, because I thought Bay Street was a state.
Right, and we met Steve Bellucci, my office, met with the DEM and the DOT, and they couldn't possibly sat on their hands any more than they did. They don't want to set a precedent. I mean, it's gonna take some higher up state legislators or something to go after DOT to try to get them to do something, because right now they won't do anything. So that's the big thing with Bay Street. And that's the only thing like that in this particular neighborhood. But we've got proof in the legislative records from the 30s that it is definitely was taken over by the.
Yeah, it is.
And the other thing, but you're right, that's one thing. But I just, quickly on the estimates, we looked at, again, taking all the pavement up, digging the material beneath it, putting it back, over $10 million for the neighborhood. We looked at Connell and Judson, which are the 2 worst roads individually. And we also just took that sewer line thing, layout, and we kind of figured out manholes, connections. Long story short, just for the sewers, if you did it piecemeal in today's dollars, from Church to Bay, Judson to State, it was roughly 1.2 million for the remedial, just for that. So the way we looked at it, if you had water, sewer, and drainage, all totaled, you'd be right around 5 million for the neighborhood that we're talking about, if you did it during that period of time, and those, for all those utilities.
And legally, the original dumpers, if you want to call them that, or, you know, the people who caused this, are they now absolved of any further?
Not only are they absolved of this in this neighborhood, they're also, there's this same material in other parts of the town that we believe is there, whether it be, you know, all the way Bears Den, but there's a line, and Nancy may remember, that they drew that literally cuts across Tiverton, and anything north of that, if the town finds it in the future, they don't have to do anything. That's
And
part
is
of the
that-
settlement.
Is that because of part of the settlement
Yeah.
agreement?
And they say north of the Sconic Bridge.
Yeah.
But one question.
That sounds like a horrible agreement.
Someone who sat through the 50-plus meetings on this. I thought when we calculated, the town wasn't really going to get much of this settlement unless we fought them and fought them. But I thought that calculation for the 550,000, one of the things we calculated in there was redoing A. Connell Street.
Yes.
Right.
Because of the mercury and everything.
Right, right.
Isn't that what the 550,000?
That was for,
Part of it was
right,
supposed to
that was
be?
for that and part of the worst green area of Judson. You're right. And I mean, we still have some money from that.
How
but
much
that's-
do we have
And I
there?
don't know what we have, 300,000?
I don't know, I haven't checked it.
Yeah,
371 we have left.
right.
Weren't we directed by DEM that
On the,
had-
right, and what we've been able to do with the DEM and the EPA is now that we cleaned up the green areas of A. Connell Street, they're allowing us some wiggle room on the asphalt section. But there is a drain line, so about maybe, 5 years ago now, the town council actually said, if Steve Bellucci wants to replace that storm drain line, it was 137 feet of A. Connell Street. At the time, it was gonna be about 50,000 for the cleanup, and the council approved that.
That was before me, though.
Yeah.
No, well, I mean, that's
Yeah.
7 years.
Oh, yeah.
7 years ago.
Yeah,
It's not
7,
5
yeah,
years
it's been a
ago.
long, yeah, it's been a while, but that was for that 137 feet along that drain line. But again, he couldn't get the money to do the repaving and so forth, so that's still there too.
I think unfortunately, when all the settlements were all done, there was only, for the town, it only seemed like it was A. Connell and Judson Street. But all of this other pavement was just not even accounted for. And there's utilities under there, drainage, and should be sewer, because this is one of the oldest neighborhoods in Tiverton. And probably a good portion of all those systems have failed or needs to be replaced in some way. And the most cost-effective way to do that is with a sewer system as opposed to individual septic systems. And particularly in these areas that have contamination.
That's happened to a lot. Property values are very bad,
If I could address the board. From the water department side of things, none of my technicians that work for me are trained to get into the area of hazardous waste. Neither am I going to get them trained. In my prior profession, I ran a Superfund site for many years in New Bedford. That's not what I need them to do. Right now, the condition of those water pipes are unknown in that whole area. Most of them are cast iron with concrete lining, put in mostly in the 80s. We're waiting for disaster to strike. We've set aside some funding to go in there and do some repairs, but it doesn't account for a lot of things, so a disaster could really happen. The money that Leroy has asked for, he was talking about a 6-foot trench box. That doesn't include the water line trench, because they'd be on opposite sides of the street. I've talked to different remediation companies, someone that I can call in the event that we do have a catastrophe down there. But it's anybody's guess as what's going to happen. The city of Fall River is now working on State Ave. They're trying to line the water line that they have. The problem we have down there, it's the highest pressure of water in the town is about 140 pounds of pressure. So if a pipe does blow, as it did in Fall River, the water came up and it was over the power lines on the telephone pole. So it could be an exciting situation.
So if I may, I think the two issues that I see is, one, that we are beginning to get a better handle on what kind of costs over time we may be looking at, although we do need to have additional talks with parties like DOT. We also need to have talks further with the fire district, the wastewater district, et cetera. The other point that was made is that if and when you do the sewer, you really should, at the same time, try to have water and drainage done as well. Because otherwise, you do the sewer, you pave the road, next year you break it up again to do the next utility. And that would, more likely than not, be many times more expensive than it has to be, even though it initially can increase the cost if, for example, the water line is on the other side of the street instead of in the same trench as the sewer. What I think needs to be done, if I'm not mistaken, is that the council come to a decision as to how it wants to define its responsibility and potential liability, and how we can fund this program over some period of time. I don't have the exact answer as to how. I've made one request, and it's in the multi-year capital plan, not just for 1 year, but for at least 5 years. That's one. But the other one would be to get clear direction from the town council to coordinate with these different entities and try to come up with a coordinated strategy and plan.
I have a question. Who owns those water lines? Is it the water district?
The water district
The water district owns the water line. So you're responsible for the replacement of that.
Right.
We're responsible for the digging and the soil only. That's what I would imagine, considering you own the water. Okay. So those pipes being replaced would be the cost of the water district.
Yeah, and the sewer pipes that we would put in
Would
would
be
be part
your-
of our project.
Your project.
We're really just
Just dealing with,
Yeah, I just want to make that clear.
So-
for
we
everyone.
don't even know if that's our street.
Well,
So
that's
Council-
what I'm asking too. I mean, who's really responsible for the,
Well, you
for,
think.
Yeah, Councilor DiMarderos makes a good point. I think my question, based on that, is was the fire district and the sewer district a party to the settlement?
We were not.
No.
So are you barred from making a claim because of the
It's
settlement?
funny, I said that same question on a conference call to them today.
I'm sure you didn't get a good answer.
It's unclear. It's interesting. I don't know, it was just ironic that the same council that represented Fall River Gas, Southern Union, happened to be on the council for the water district. And they said just to keep out of it. Yeah, only in Rhode Island.
Wastewater district did not exist.
The wastewater district didn't exist at the time.
We didn't come into
So-
2014.
I don't think, but I don't, and I asked that same thing to the DEM, does the DOT have the right to make a claim of the contamination on Bay Street? And I don't think they do, because I think the settlement agreement's based on the state of Rhode Island settling it. So I asked that question to Susan Forcier from the DEM, who worked on the case. But that's a good question too, because there's not only, just so everybody understands Bay Street, there's not only these 14 or whatever, I forgot how many there are on Bay Street itself, call it 9. There's those 9 connections, but then every location where Hooper Street comes off Connecticut is gonna be a central manhole to tie in those lateral streets. So Bay Street in the future is gonna have even more contamination to deal with. But like I say, I mean, the solicitor, if we wanna sit down and we can figure out a strategy to try to get further along with DOT, that would be great.
I think that would probably require some guidance from the council as well, but I think it's probably not a bad idea.
so
and help from the state legislators, I think.
I
Well,
have
the
a
state
couple of
legis-
questions, though.
Isn't the state legislation coming next week or the week after? So it might be something that we need to keep in mind to speak to them about also.
Maybe we should.
Because I believe that Jay and them are
What,
coming.
what do you want the solicitor to do? There seems to be some question as to if there are some rights or an in for getting monies from this company through this wastewater and from the fire district. And I think we need to explore that. We need Geo to explore that and see what we can and
I
cannot
agree.
do before we do anything, right?
I
And then
agree.
we definitely have to find out if Bay Street is our street.
No,
Did
Trish-
you want to say something, Tricia?
Yeah, I interrupted Tricia.
I had a couple of questions. So it sounds to me like the most cost-effective way to deal with Bay Street is actually to remediate the whole thing, yes? Because between the sewer pipe on one side and the water pipe on another side, and then the drainage pipes.
Right.
That if you're gonna if you are going to remediate Bay Street, you'd have to do the whole thing. So if you were going to remediate all of it, and then keeping in mind that the town would then be responsible for, reconstructing the street and repaving the whole thing, is there an estimate for what that would cost?
Yeah, I did that estimate separately, and best we can figure, and here's the complicating factor, is when they put the sewer interceptor down, we don't know how much intermixing. But assuming you get rid of the worst of the worst, which is below the pavement, it's about $1.3 million from Judson to state for everything.
To do the full remediation, the town's portion.
Right,
The
the
full
town-
remediation, and then the drainage, and then complete repaving of the road.
Yeah, it's 1.3 for the remediation and the repaving, but not the drainage, because I don't know enough about the drainage. I don't even know if DPW has a drainage plan. They actually just did some work between Judson and Hooper, and we got a call. We went down there and we assisted the town to make sure that soil got rid of, because they had a failure on one of the drain lines there. But that's what our estimate was. And it's interesting, because Bay Street's anywhere from 50 feet wide to the north end of it, believe it or not, is 55.5 feet wide.
But the biggest question, and every once in a while it's the State Street, and every once in a while it's Tiverton Street. It depends on who you're speaking to and what the problem is. But what I understood, it is a state.
It is a state road, and my understanding,
So
based
shouldn't the
on
state
that.
be paying for this?
Okay, so my understanding is the state, there's some, and I don't know what the definition of maintenance is, like a plow truck. The DOT doesn't bring a plow truck here, it's Tiverton's plow truck. Mowing the grass is Tiverton,
I
but,
don't know why, though.
yeah, and. it's
I think it was a precedent for.
Well,
way- I
Fish,
think-
Fish Road's the same way. That was accepted at the same time, parts of Fish Road. That's a question, and I know Steve Bellucci, we're 99.9% sure, and I believe the DOT has admitted the fact it's their road. I mean, it's pretty clear we have the legislative when they took it over. The question is exactly maintenance and trying to get them to step up to the plate on this thing here. And that's something we have to
If I
do.
may, I don't think we're going to resolve that here tonight. I do think we need help from the state representatives, the senators and reps, to help us with that and bring people to the table, including DOT.
I think
And
they
we
should
may
be put
well-
on notice if they're coming.
We may well want to ask the governor's office for help on this as well, because that's what it takes. You need to bring people in and say, we can't just keep dancing around this. We need to have responsible parties stepping up to the plate and sharing responsibility for this.
I also think the GEO needs to
Yeah.
look further into whether or not
Absolutely.
the wastewater and the water district
Yep.
has some kind of litigation.
He needs to look at the settlement, he needs to guide us,
The
and he
settlement,
needs to
they
see
weren't
if
involved.
there's
I know
an
you-
opening
You didn't
to
even exist. That was.
get money.
So,
And
Let's see if we can jump on board and get something.
Well, I think from the district standpoint, we're such a small entity. I mean, our budget is very small compared to this, so we wouldn't have the funding and all that stuff to to sue anybody on anything.
Well, we could work,
We'd have to work
we'd
something
have to
out.
work it through out.
We still need guidance.
Yes.
I think Trish.
I do. I actually have two more questions, if that's okay. So, long-term plan, right, to sewer everything. These lots that have the ELURs on them, and even potentially another lot which is presumed to be clean, but you never know.
Right.
So, when the sewer line goes in and the digging has to happen from the house to the connection point,
Right.
who's responsible for that digging?
Okay.
And who deals with that contamination if there's any that's found?
Okay, so out of all the settlement, even though we had to blow through a lot of that secondary payout, some of which they've recovered, there's a $250,000 escrow agreement to cover that differential cost from the edge of the green area, which is the edge of the right-of-way, to their house. So if they spend an extra $350 to get rid of that soil, that money comes out of, so we're going to be administrating that with the DEM and making sure the soil's taken care of. And on those cases where we have an ELUR, we will be putting the orange snow fence back. So we don't have to chase it. We made it clear with DEM, we're going to dig this, put the orange fence back, and we're done. And they're fine with that.
So, okay, now I'm a little confused. So there was, as part of the settlement, money set aside for trenching from the house to the road for future sewer, potentially,
Right.
or
Yep.
whatever. But there was never any part of the settlement that was set aside for the remediation of the sewer in the roadway.
Right,
So-
and,
So,
right.
I think if you look at the settlement, the people had to sign even generations away for any rights to do any more suing for anything they find. If you look in the settlement, it's even like for grandchildren, great-grandchildren. It was incredible,
Oh, yeah.
You know,
what was given away.
I'm just thrown by the fact that there seems to have been a plan for dealing with the sewer line from the house to the road, but there was
Oh,
no,
yeah,
but
and-
no plan for the sewer line for the road.
And-
It's a little,
And you're right. It was, personally, it killed me to have to see the town settle, but by the same token, we would still be in litigation today. We had special environmental attorneys come in. They wanted, I don't remember, it was either $50,000 or $100,000 retainer just to start looking at the stuff. So it would have, at $400 or $600 an hour. We just had a mediation. I think the lawyers in the room for that mediation in Boston, it was costing $12,000 an hour. So it's amazing how fast you can run up a bill. And there were two other parties that were countersued. Firestone was one because they had the fire, and they just gave Southern Union somewheres, I'm guessing $1.5 million, whatever, somewheres in that neighborhood, just so they didn't have to pay attorneys. Honeywell was sued because they made the asphalt tarvia that went on the roads that the town bought back in 1930. They settled for some unknown amount, guessing $1 million or $2 million. So it's amazing how much money, and these guys, so in the settlement, and then I just learned this, when the attorneys went in, including the town attorneys, they originally offered $12 million, to use a number. They said, well, we'll have to get back to you. They went back the next day, nope, we've decided we'll only give you 11.5. So it was really painful and really unfair, frankly.
and so how many houses altogether are potentially served by sewer? If you did all of it, do you know how many houses exactly that is, or about?
I think it's a couple of hundred in that whole area if you served everything, but I'm not, don't quote
Right,
me.
in the area that we remediated, if we have 35 that have ELURs, I'm just looking at my map, there's probably 85, I think there's 85 lots in the study area. And that plan, we tweaked it a little bit based on, because that was actually from a plan that was done back in the 70s when the federal government was handing out money. So we've looked at that even to make everybody connected, from church to bay and so forth.
So about 85.
Yeah, about 85.
So, just to ask if we could move on, we need guidance and may I make a motion that we've heard what people have said. We need guidance from GEO to look at the settlement, to look where our options are. We also need to know from the legislators or whoever can answer us if Bay Street is a state street or Tiverton owns it. And I think then we can go from there.
Gio, can we make a vote here, because it was advertised as an open forum and it doesn't really say, it's just announcements, comments, questions, and presentations. We usually don't vote during the open forum part. I'm just asking.
Yeah, no, I don't think you need to make a vote. I think just
Direct.
if
Direct him to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah, just give a consensus of how we feel.
If the chair, acting chair today, the vice president would ask, for the general sense of the council as to whether that's a good, exercise of resources. That's probably all you need to do.
Yeah.
Is that the general sense of the council?
Yes.
That's my sense of the general sense.
Yeah, that's my sense
There
of the
it
general
is.
sense also.
And could I suggest that if we're having legislators, if they're planning to be here in 2 weeks, that they are somewhat alerted to one of the issues that we would like to have addressed?
Yes.
And not just spring it on them so
Yes.
that we have to wait. Okay.
Actually, when they responded back that they'd be coming on the 11th, they asked for the council if they had any particular concerns to let me know so I could forward it to them,
Good.
so they'd be
One.
prepared.
But there was also one mentioned at the budget committee, at the budget meeting we had. Does anyone remember that one? I wrote it down, I'll look.
Yeah, there was.
I don't remember. Do you remember what it was, Jan?
Sorry, I didn't quite.
During, I think, the first or second budget meeting we had with ours, something came up and we said we need to talk to the legislation about it, but no.
I forget
don't
what it
remember.
is, too.
Yeah, I'll look at my notes, because I know we said that.
Yep.
Okay, does that conclude the questions we
I
have?
think so, yeah.
Okay, thank you for.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Information.
Thank you.
Okay, next on the agenda, under B, public hearings, is advertised public hearings for cultural survival in Cambridge, Massachusetts, requesting approval of a sound variance for cultural survival bazaar at Tiverton Four Corners Arts Center, 3852 Main Road, July 27th through July 28th, from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m., and approval of a special event permit, non-advertised, subject to meeting all legal requirements.
Hello,
Oh,
thank you. My name's Danae Laura, and I'm the manager of the Cultural Survival Bazaar program. And Cultural Survival is a human rights organization focusing on indigenous rights internationally. And this would be the 19th annual Cultural Survival Bazaar at Tiverton Four Corners Arts Center. And the specifics we wanted to run by your organization are that there'll be no alcohol at the event. We're currently working on other permits with the town hall, and that there is always live music, but it's at a level for background, and so that conversations can still happen.
Is this with tents?
And you've-
Different artists in there? Yeah.
And
Absolutely.
you've had this many years.
This will be our
This
19th
is your
year.
ninth.
Yeah.
Now, I think for the last couple of years, we have had a police present there. And
Correct,
it'll still-
exactly.
Okay.
And in particular during the busiest hours.
Right.
Mhm.
Okay.
Okay, so we're looking for
A motion.
approval of the sound variance and a special event permit? Is that
Bush.
one motion or two, or? Oh, I'm sorry. Well, just for my information, is it separate
It's one
motions for
motion.
each of those?
I would do two separate motions.
Okay. So this is advertised as a public hearing, so I'll ask the 3 times if anybody from the public would like to be heard. And the second time, anybody who would like to be heard, please come forward. And last call for comments on the Cultural Survival Bazaar. Anybody wants to be heard?
May I make one more comment before you guys all motion? It will be on July 27th and 28th, and we would love to invite you all to join us. It's a wonderful event.
It is. I go to it every year.
Lovely, thank you.
Yes.
So we'll close the public hearing portion, and I'll ask if anybody has motion. Let's start with the approval of the sound variance. If anybody has a motion to do that.
I make a motion to approve the sound variance for the Cultural Survival Bazaar at Tiverton Four Corners Art Center, 3852 Main Road, July 27th through July 28th, from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m.
Second.
Okay, any discussion? Okay, all in favor? Looks unanimous. And now I'll entertain a motion for the approval of the special event permit.
I make a motion to approve the special event permit for the Cultural Survival Bazaar at Tiverton Four Corners Art Center, 3852 Main Road, July 27th through July 28th, from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m.
Second.
Any discussion? Okay, all in favor? And again, unanimous. Thank you very much. Have a
Thank
great
you
night.
all, and thank you for joining us.
Thanks.
Take care, have a good night.
All right, and now we are the town council sitting as the Board of Licensing for the Tiverton Casino Hotel at 777 Tiverton Casino Boulevard, and that's over a request for approval of a victualling license.
It's been a while since we've seen you.
Formally licensed under 5-5 Pizza
Forgot what you look
and
like.
subject to meeting all legal requirements.
What happened with that pie?
So what happened to Five
What happened to
Pies?
5 Pie?
We're gonna take over and self-operate that space. They're going out.
As pizza?
No, it's gonna
remain.
No, it's gonna remain a pizza place, but they're
Oh.
not,
Their franchise is not from this area.
right.
So the casino's gonna run a
We're gonna run it.
pizza.
So we have a victualling license for the casino, and then they had their own victualling
Right.
license. We wanna expand ours to take over that space, and
So we're gonna call it 6 pies instead of 5 now?
All right.
As long as it's
They
thin
had good
crust.
pizza, too.
As long as the pizza's good.
Yeah, it's good, it was good.
So now, if we're sitting
Their
as
pizza
the
is
Board of
good.
Licensing, does the public have a hearing right, or?
No, no.
Is anybody going to
I'll
get up?
ask, does anybody want to be heard on this? I'll only do one time, because I don't have to ask. All right, does anyone want to make a motion on this?
I'll make a motion to approve a victualling license for Twin River Casino Hotel. I'm looking to see exactly what this
This
is for,
Tiverton
though.
Casino.
For
For a
the,
victualling
I am,
license.
well, I said that, subject to meeting all legal requirements, and I guess the address is 777 Tiverton Casino Boulevard.
Second.
I just asked, it's just, Mark, is it, just to clarify, it's an expansion of the existing victualling
yeah,
license?
it's,
Yes.
Okay, so I think we should just make sure the motion and.
well,
To include
Couldn't we
the,
just say-
to include the former
yeah,
5 Pie
licensed
pizza
under
space.
Pie Five Pizza. The area licensed under 5 Pie Pizza. Okay,
But I think the distinction is whether we're issuing a new license or just expanding.
we're expanding.
Or expanding the old one.
And
I guess,
second?
per the key for drawing, location number 7,
yes, I think that's correct.
that's what it would be. So I'll restate my motion to expand the victualling license for the Tiverton Casino Hotel at 777 Tiverton Casino Boulevard to include location 7 as listed on the 2019 key for drawing of licensed premises.
And I'll re-expand my second.
Okay, any further discussion?
Are they going to have gluten-free pizza?
Maybe, never know.
You want to write that in?
Quite possible.
No, I'm sorry.
They don't now.
All right, all in favor? That's unanimous?
Thank you.
Thank
That
you.
was quick and easy, Mark. Easiest one, huh?
All that easy. If you need me,
Don't say that.
All right, looks like the next order of business is unfinished. Under Counselor Coulter, update the council liaisons to boards and commissions. We have a sheet in our packet that's 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 vacancies.
I just had a couple of questions on it. I'm just trying to find out where there's, some people have 4 and 5, and I'm just wondering if it's because nobody stepped forward, or,
That's pretty much what happened.
Yeah, but also
Yeah, it's just-
throughout the years, I've gained more because other people didn't want them. So that's basically what it
okay,
is.
all
Yeah,
right.
that's basically what it ended up
Okay,
being.
oh, all right.
Because some people only wanted to do 1 or 1 or 2.
yeah.
So some of us just took on some more
All right,
because there was
it
no
was
one to
just,
represent
I'm
them.
just like, well, I don't,
And you could have more than one
Yeah,
liaison
like,
to a
if
commission.
somebody wanted to join someone, that would be wonderful, because if they needed us at a meeting, or they asked for us, if somebody else was available. So a lot of times, we had two on all of these also, it just depended.
do we
Like,
have to decide tonight, Nancy, or can I
No,
think of it? I just had that question, because I couldn't make up my mind, because I didn't know whether I had a right to.
you can join as many as you
volunteer
want.
for any-
Donna. You can do them all if you'd like.
Okay.
Volunteer for anyone you want.
Like, I wanted to keep the ones that I have because I know the people on the
Well,
board.
I
and
might
I've been
take
working-
one from you.
No, but
No,
you
I'm
can
just-
join me, but definitely you could join me. There's no reason why there can't be two.
Right, you can't have two on it.
Oh, yeah, you can.
You just can't have a quorum. presumably.
Yeah, we had two on cemetery, me and
I'll
Joan.
let you know,
Just by
Nancy.
way of my request, when I just discussed this with Counselor Coulter to see what his intentions were, he said whatever isn't taken, he and I will split.
Yeah, I
So
already
if
heard
people
that.
want to volunteer for some of these.
There you got 'em. You got all of those.
Yeah, he
If
told me
somebody else
that,
wants to volunteer for them, then.
he told me the same thing, Justin, that you and him will take all of them if no one wants to.
So I can resign?
He did. Well, whatever's
So
not
I don't
taken.
know what the proper.
They can get to me if they want any, that will be the current list, and then I'll fill
Okay.
yours in.
Sure.
All right, all right.
But it's,
That's why I didn't
is
pick
there
anything.
any chance that anything emerges from one of these commissions or committees that needs us to address it without, is there any problem with not having a liaison for the time being, that something might arise?
No, some of
No,
them don't
'cause
have
they'll
any
call
anyway.
Jan if there's a problem. Well, it's true. If there's a problem, they'll call Jan.
Okay, all right, I'll have
Okay,
to
so-
think about it.
Do we bring this back up at some point, or just as a recurring item?
We'll just keep
What-
updating it if I
Yeah,
get
we-
any responses.
What we've done in the past is just give Nancy your name and what commission you want to be on.
Yep.
And if there's more than two interested, then Nancy can bring them back, and one of us,
Yeah.
Okay.
someone will say, no, I really don't want to do it, then it's
All right.
fine, or whatever. That's
It's
usually
just
the
a
way
list.
it's
There was so
worked.
much, I'm like confused, I'm like, should I,
No, you can join
I
in
don't
when you
know.
want, Donna.
okay, all right.
Just not four on one commission.
Right, and it's been routinely two. That's what it's been, two councils.
Two the most. Some only have one.
Some only have one because there was only interest. And it's
Okay.
fine.
All right. All right, so,
Well, I guess in order to follow the instructions I was given by the sponsor of this item, if you could just note, I'll take arts, economic development, historical cemeteries, this is exciting, and
No, that one I had.
we'll give Rob Coulter, Budget Committee, Economic Development, Historic Preservation, and Tree Commission, and as anybody else wants to join those, we can step aside. So if anything comes up where they need
Oh,
connection.
okay.
Which ones?
So you basically filled them all.
Yeah, they're all filled
Okay.
out, except for the County Chamber of Commerce. I guess we could put Rob on Chamber of Commerce. He's down in Newport all the time.
Well, he's just
Council-
not here, so I'm gonna put him on
Right.
everything.
here to
Borrow
say
that momentarily.
so.
Right.
It's like going to the bathroom, coming back, and you're president of the PTO. That happened to me once.
That was a great episode of Wonder
That's what happens when you're not here.
Yeah.
Some reps drive after greatness, and some have it thrust upon them while they're in the bathroom. Okay, so now we're on to new business.
Oh,
Charles?
I got one I'll do.
Okay.
I'll do the Historic Preservation Advisory Board.
Okay.
Did you get that modified?
And I'll probably pick something else.
Yeah.
Yeah, well,
This is a big,
as people volunteer,
big
take us off
decision.
them.
Big decision. So,
All right, I'm sorry, I jumped the gun. Did anybody else have comments or?
odds? She's the odds. She's always painting.
All right, then now we'll close that unfinished business item and we'll move on to new business. Charles and Lisa
I'm thinking.
Rose request streetlight on Myrtle Way, utility pole number 8. And we have in our packets a response from Richard Rogers, DPW Director, and Police Chief Patrick Jones. I also have, uniquely in my packet, photographs of the area, which I'll start with Nancy and we'll.
Mr. President,
No, they all
We all have it.
I,
Everybody got it?
Yeah,
Yep.
everybody got it.
Okay.
Mr. President, I have to recuse myself.
I don't even know why. That's okay. Oh, your cousin, of course. Joe's related to everybody.
Okay, our,
I think the department DPW guy,
so what's the proper order of business? Do we hear from the Roses first, or?
are they here?
Yes.
Oh.
Are they here? Oh, they're there. Oh, there he is.
Hello, my wife couldn't be here tonight. She's homesick, but it's really a safety issue at the end of the street there. It's no different than the end of Brayton Road or at the bottom of Booger Marsh. The cars pull down the end, and it just stops. My driveway's at the very end, and you can either go left or right. But during the day is no problem, but at night it's pitch black down there. There's 11 houses in that development, and there's one street light in the whole area. You know, it's really dark and black. I mean, anybody that's been in there during the day knows the area, but with the GPSs now and stuff, whenever there's an event at the high school or the middle school, it takes you the quickest route most of the time, and they end up delivery trucks, UPS trucks, even the UPS drivers, when they're new, they end up down there, and they're lost all the time.
Where is Myrtle Way?
Right between the high school and middle school at the end of Floral Park.
Oh, yeah.
If you pull in all the way at the end, and you can either go left or right or straight into my driveway, and
Oh,
usually
okay.
they end up in the driveway at night and during the day, and they usually stop and ask. You know, it's an ongoing problem. It's been going on for years, but it's really bad now with the GPSs and stuff. It's it's bad. Thank you.
Just for the record, I'm guessing from the logo on your sweatshirt that you are Charles Rose.
Yes,
just
me.
for the record.
Yeah. Yep, that's me. Yep, thank you.
And now the DPW.
Now we'll hear from the DPW director.
Hi, good evening. I understand the Rose's concern. However, considering the existing conditions, the alternatives available, the review by the police department and DPW, and following 70-8 of the ordinances, specifically B4, that if there's alternatives available that will address the concerns, such as passive reflectorized signs, warning signs, directional signs, it's the general consensus at this time that those alternatives are better than a street light. And what we would recommend is that not a throughway sign be placed on Floral Way near the beginning of Floral Way at Booger Marsh Road, and a reflectorized sign at Utility Pole 8 indicating the road turns to the west.
Why aren't you advising a street light? Is it dark? Have you been down there?
There's a few streets, quite a few streets that are dark in town, but they're not all lit. And a safe, proactive approach in this case that will address the concerns, which is people turning around in driveways, that would be addressed by a sign at the beginning indicating that it's not a throughway. Somebody hitting the pole, a reflectorized sign indicating the road turns would address that issue. And misguided vehicles traveling down Floral Way, going on to Poinsettia, then on to Mayflower, then on to Myrtle Way. That would be addressed by the not a throughway sign at the beginning of the road.
It seems to me, and you attached the Section 78B4,
I didn't get
and that we would have to make a finding that the purpose of the lighting cannot be achieved by using these lesser means first. So I don't know if we could make that decision at that point, so.
Well, no, the town council, to my knowledge, can certainly overrule DPW, but that's our
I meant,
recommendation.
I don't think we would be in a position to say that it couldn't be served by what you're suggesting.
Right. We feel it could be served by what was indicated with the passive signs and the reflectorized sign.
Do we have a sense of the differences in cost between the signs and installation of a light?
I did not price that out, but I know a street light would be an ongoing charge to keep it energized. And my hunch certainly is that 2 signs would be much less expensive than an installation of a street light.
Could we make a motion?
Oh, hold on. Okay, so does anybody else have questions for the director?
I'm sympathetic to having a driveway that people turn around in, because I used to have one of those. But I also do understand the possibility of solving the problem with signs, so I'd be willing to go along with that. But if the council decides to do that, what I would like to do, though, is, to ask the homeowners to come back if it doesn't work. If in 6 or 9 months it's still the same problem and it's really not working, then I'd like to invite them to come back and let us know that it's not if we try the signs first.
I absolutely agree.
But,
Yeah.
and maybe the signs will work. Maybe, maybe that will stop that. I do have one question. I know it's not a dead end, but on the entrance sign, if it says not a throughway versus dead end, is that keep more people from trying to go that way? But or not really?
It might keep more people from going down that way, but technically Floral Way is not
But
a dead end.
technically, it's not a dead end,
Right.
right?
I like your suggestions, Tricia, and I think dead end's probably a better sign to put up. That's pretty blunt.
But it's not a dead end.
It's not a dead end?
It's
Or-
not a dead
kinda
end, and
right.
it comes
All
up on GPS as a
Or,
way to
well,
go.
or maybe if it says not a throughway and no outlet, because isn't that the problem, right? There's no outlet. So it's not a dead end, but there's no outlet. So maybe if it said that, it would really discourage people from going down there thinking they're going to get someplace else.
Okay.
Okay, and one of the items also that was considered is that there are approximately, while maintaining safety, there's approximately 86 lights still turned off from years and years ago in the town in a conservation effort. So that was one of the thoughts also, while still maintaining safety.
Does anybody else have questions for the director? Did we hear from the police chief, or is it pretty much redundant?
Thank you.
Yeah, he's agreeing. He's
Oh, I know where Floral Way
Good evening. So once we received the request from Mr. Rose, and I worked with the DPW director, the officers on the midnight shift actually went there when it was dark, so we could look at the area, and part of their recommendation is the recommendation that's been put forth by the director, that we try the sign approach first and get some DOT federally mandated signs for that area and see if that curbs the problem that Mr. Rose is experiencing. Thank you.
Do you have a sense of how long it would take to get the signs?
I would guess we could put those up, today's already February 25th, but by next month.
Mr. Rose, does that satisfy you on a trial basis, to give it a try?
But make sure
At
you,
one point, they did have a dead end sign up. Wasn't there a dead end sign there a few years ago?
What happened to it?
There was one.
it wasn't a dead end. Somebody took it down.
But this would be, the sign in front of you, on that pole in front of your property would be new, right? That hasn't been
On the
tried.
property, yes, in front of the property, yes. But on the main, when you first pull in there, because there's no, once you get in there, it shows on paper that they're all connected, but it's all, you can't get through any of those spots.
So is it a dead end?
Technically,
not.
all the streets in that area,
All go
Fern
around.
Way, Myrtle Way, they all either end heading west. Mayflower is by definition, it goes
All
to
right.
the west, and it stubs out for maybe 20 feet or so to the east.
Okay.
They're all overgrown. The fire trucks,
You can't really get anywhere.
down. You can't.
Like,
Once
you
you
can
get
only
down,
get in
you
the
gotta back
neighborhood.
up.
You can't get,
You can't do nothing, it's pitch black down there at night.
Okay, so
It's
the
ugly at night.
neighborhood's dead end.
do I have a motion then?
I'll make a motion to install not a throughway sign at the beginning of Floral Way near Boogamarsh Road, with the understanding that Mr. Rose will inform us in a couple of months. What do you think, 4 or 6 months? Tell us if it's working or not, if there's still a problem.
And the reflectors, yeah. The
And the what?
reflectors also.
And reflectors on the pole.
Indicating that the roadway.
Install a reflectorized sign in front of the utility pole indicating that the roadway turns to the west. Okay? All right.
Did you also want a no outlet, which is?
Yes.
Yes. Yeah.
Yes, Don is making that motion.
Need a second.
What do you
Second, second.
There's more?
A no outlet sign.
Oh,
I think she started with
they
that.
want more?
Yeah,
No
she-
outlet.
Not a throughway,
Oh, well, that's what was, okay.
but not a throughway and no outlet.
And no outlet. I'll amend that. Thank you.
Second.
Any further discussion?
No?
All in favor?
Not a dead end, not a throughway, no.
I think we're unanimous on that.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think it is a dead end.
All right, thank you.
My
Let
house.
us know how that turns out. Next up is the town administrator, ratification of agreement with ESS Group for attached proposal for the 2018 RIPDES small MS4 stormwater management annual report at a cost of $3,525.
You have in your packet a copy of the contract that we use every year for this work to be done. And the proposal includes an estimated cost of $3,525. This came up sort of quick this time because last year we were very late with getting this permit work done. But it's actually due next month. So I would hope that we can move forward with this. This is a consulting group that is familiar with the situation. We do hope to do some more substantive follow-up this year once we have the new report, but I recommend that you approve this agreement for another year's worth of stormwater reporting.
Do you know how much is in that account, Jan?
7,000, I believe.
Yes, there's 7,000 in the budget.
'Cause I couldn't find the 5540, but I could find the 6813.
5540 is Public Works.
I know, but I couldn't find it.
Oh.
I was looking and looking, and, all right, I'm fine.
Does anybody else have questions for the administrator? Would anybody like to make a motion?
I'll make a motion. To ratify the agreement with ESS Group for our 2018 RIPDES Small MS4 Stormwater Management Annual Report at a cost of $35.25.
Second it.
Any further discussion? Just want to know, is that RIPDES, or do you say RIPDES, or?
RIPDES.
RIPDES.
Okay. For future reference, we can not spell it out. All right, all in favor?
Deb.
All right, thank you. Next again, town administrator requesting approval, to approve amendment of agreement with RI Interlocal Risk Management Trust regarding participation in a consortium for drug and alcohol testing and related services.
So again, this is a agreement we already have with the interlocal trust, with it administering a program for random testing for drug and alcohol for those employees who drive commercial vehicles. And the only amendment that is proposed is an increase in the cost after the trust evaluated the cost it is incurring. And the details are in your packet. But since it is an amendment to an agreement, it's up to you to approve it.
Yeah.
So
I
this
think
is,
the increase was just $5, wasn't it, or something?
going to negotiate it, go back and ask for 3,
No.
and I assume this is just a cost. They're charging everybody the additional.
Yes.
Okay. Any questions for the administrator?
Okay.
Anybody like to make a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the request to the amendment agreement with Rhode Island Interlocal Risk Management Trust regarding participation in a consortium for drug and alcohol testing and related services.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any further discussion? Okay. All in favor? Unanimous?
Anything you
And
want tonight.
once again, to the town administrator, to approve contract amendment for Police Chief Patrick Jones to conform to new department head contract format and a salary increase.
I actually failed to ask for one other thing. I'm not sure you need to go back, but unless you want to sign these other agreements formally after the meeting, if you could authorize me to sign them. I'm sorry, I should have made that part of the request, but
So the ratification and the amendment for the interlocal
Yeah.
trust? Okay, well, you can just sign them.
I'm not sure what you're saying. Say it again.
Well, we moved to ratify an agreement and to approve an amendment to an agreement, but he's just asking for some
Oh, he needs to be
kind of
able to.
motion for somebody to actually sign it.
Oh, okay.
You mean this, that he can sign it?
Yeah,
Oh,
so
did I amend my motion? That he can sign?
No,
I don't think you need to. I think it's been voted already,
That's what
right?
I
So-
thought,
so,
yeah.
Yeah,
no,
so
I-
it's all set.
thank you. So next is the contract amendment for Chief Jones. And the two things there, one is that we edited the contract that he signed last year so that it is consistent with the form of contract that you recently approved. I discussed it with him. He's fine with the amendments, which are in the red line version that you have in your packet. And also, the amendment would include a salary increase as explained in my requests for being placed on the agenda. And I believe you've had some time to look at the contract, so I would like to recommend that you approve this extension of the contract and the salary increase.
questions for the administrator? Just mainly out of curiosity, was it budget assuming this would, was the budget set assuming this would happen?
What would be, I believe so.
You usually accommodate for it. It doesn't say that it should happen, but it allows it to happen, yes.
Yeah. I'll make a motion to approve the contract amendment for Police Chief Jones. I'm looking at it here.
Conform with
To conform to the
new department head.
new department head
Format.
model, and a salary increase of 2%.
Second.
Any further discussion? And that includes the authority to
Sign it.
re-sign. All right, all in favor? Unanimous? Once
Thank you.
more,
And on this particular contract, Nancy ratifies that the council voted to approve that. That's standard, so that will happen.
all right, next up.
You're confusing me today for no reason. I don't know. It's okay.
I won't try again. Maybe it's more explanation than is needed.
I think you're going too deep now.
Approve, ratify,
It's
Ratify.
certify, I should say. but-
Yeah,
certify,
yeah.
ratify, and approve. Town administrator ratification of IBPO 3-year contract, July 1st to July 1st, 2018 through June 30th, 2021.
Okay,
fiscal
and
impact.
Labor Council is on his way, so we could try to wait. On the other hand, you have seen the tentative agreement that was, I believe you have reviewed it and already initially indicated your support for that. It's been posted,
And back here's the fiscal impact,
and the fiscal impact
because
statement.
that's what we were waiting for.
Right. And that has been posted for public review and comment. So unless there are questions, you might want to consider ratifying it.
I'd also note that at our workshop discussing the agreement, we also went over post-employment benefit changes that were highly in the town's favor as a result of this
Do you
agreement.
want to talk about that?
Well, this was all negotiated within the last year and worked on to try to get all these concessions, and we gave some, and I think it's a very good contract. And I think that, there was a lot of give and take here. And
Well, we've already explained this.
Yeah, we have.
And I think everybody on the council understands it. And we did at the.
Yes, we did.
I could also suggest as a procedural matter that if you wanted to move it and open it for discussion now, and there was public comment that was best responded to by Labor Council, you could table it until such time as Labor Council is here and then bring it back for that questioning.
Well, I don't anticipate much. We can deal with the parliamentary problems as they arise, so.
We can ask if anyone in the public would like to ask a question now. If we can't answer it, then we could wait for Tim. There's not much public here. Any of you want to ask anything right now? No, or forever hold your, no.
Or for the next 2.5 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have 2.5
What'd you
years.
say, Chief? Did you say something?
So,
Okay.
Yeah, I think we
I think we have, but just to be sure, this is the last version from Tim, correct?
Correct.
Okay, just double checking that.
Yeah.
And so what will happen next is that the actual contract will be edited and signed off on by attorneys for both sides, and then it will be executed.
And here he is,
Oh, here he is.
the man of the
Well, just
hour.
in time to hear the motion, I think.
Yeah, because there's no color.
Come right up to the podium.
No, we don't need them. All right, so we have a motion, right?
I don't think there's been a motion made yet.
Did anybody make a motion?
No, there's no motion yet.
You want me to make a motion?
Make a motion, Denise.
Nobody.
No. I'd like to make a motion to ratify IBPO 3-year contract going from July 1st, 2018 through June 30th, 2021.
Second.
Any further discussion? Okay, hearing none, all in favor? And once more unanimous. Thank you.
I think it says.
If I may, Mr. Chair, I do want to thank Tim Cavazza, our Labor Counsel, who has given invaluable assistance, and we couldn't have done it without him, as well as the people who worked on the negotiation team last year and this year. But also give credit to, once again, the union, which really negotiated in good faith and saw our needs as much as they wanted us to see theirs. So credit goes around to all. Thank you.
It was a very civil negotiation, and,
Well, they carry guns.
well, yeah, I know, we were afraid.
Town administrator, request approval to advertise for a recreation director.
I believe you have in your packet a draft advertisement as well as a job description. As you may know, the current coordinator is not coming back from Florida. He is helping for the time being, arranging as much as he can for replacements or people coming back to do, for example, lifeguard jobs. But we would like to go out. We're actually actively talking to people at this time as well. I worked with the Recreation Commission to see how we can best fill this as quickly as possible, but in particular get ready for the next season. And so we're making some progress there, but I would hope that you could approve this advertisement.
Any questions for the administrator?
No.
Would anybody like to make a motion?
I move we approve the advertisement as submitted for a new recreation program coordinator.
Second.
Any further discussion? Okay, hearing none, all in favor? Unanimous?
That's it.
That brings us to town administrator announcements.
The cough? Yeah, what is it, honey or something?
None, thank you.
How about the council? Any announcements from the council?
Comes from Switzerland. No, but I have a question, not an announcement, but I have a question for something that I'd like to get on the agenda, but I want to run this by the town administrator. You know, the beach committee, the Grinnell's Beach Improvement Committee, we're just a building committee, and as soon as the beach is finished, we're done. But we're starting to get a lot of requests from people who want to have events down there and activities and all kinds of things, and that's not really in our purview. And the beach itself belongs to recreation, but the abutment in the gas station site, the Shade Sail Pavilion, we've never had them before. They've never been assigned. They're not in anybody's jurisdiction. So unless there's something else going on, I would like to get that on the agenda. So those facilities get assigned to somebody's responsibility? Because people want to have these great events down there, but I don't know where to send them.
Would be recreation.
And it's probably recreation, but the council's going to have to formally designate, whatever group is going to be responsible for the, day-to-day management of that. So could we put that on unless there's a reason, can we put that on the agenda soon?
I'm fine with that, and just so that you know, I have had discussions with the Recreation Commission about this, and they are getting requests, for example, for food trucks and everything else.
Yeah.
I had to get up to speed as to who does what in this town when it comes to things like that. But I guess it is their authority to do so. They are going to work closely together with me, but I've also suggested communication with the beach
Yeah.
committee.
And we've worked with them pretty closely
Right.
throughout this whole project, but officially somebody has to give them formal jurisdiction
And we may well want to develop some more policies as to how we use certain areas, and this is a good way to get there.
Okay, so maybe the next available meeting, we could do that?
We'll put on the calendar. Who owns that calendar? Is that just Rob's thing?
And Nancy.
Poor Nancy.
Okay, and I know there's also been talk of, in the next fiscal year, probably having a bit more conversation about how we do, who has ownership of what, responsibility for.
One other thing I'd like to add to that is, in general, I feel that when we talk about recreation, there really are two separate aspects to the recreation program. One is really facilities management and maintenance, and one is programming. And I think it makes the most sense, and I may have said that before in a council meeting, that DPW has the responsibility for facilities management, working closely with the Recreation Commission, but still take the lead on that. And that would also go for Grinnell's Beach and the abutment project. Whereas the Recreation Commission can then focus on programmatic issues and work with the council on policy issues.
And programmatic would include things like private events.
It would probably also include and I think there ought to be a maybe slightly more formal permitting process for special events and things
We'll
like
have to
that.
make a policy.
But also the programs that the town actually offers in terms of summer camps, things like that.
Any other council announcements or questions? Okay, town solicitor, any announcements or warnings?
But we're getting a raise, no?
The solicitor doesn't have one. I do want to make an announcement that I did receive from Municipal Court Judge Humphrey a decision regarding a charter complaint that was presented. So the decision was that, and I've already forwarded it to all the council, and I forwarded it to the solicitor today, and to the person who had filed a complaint, Michael Burke. So the decision was, well, the judge put to remand it back to the clerk, but I think he meant just to give it back to me because I have no jurisdiction over this. My suggestion would be that we need some legislation to adjust our enabling act that was established for the municipal court. We actually need it for more than this one incident. So that's what I would suggest, but I don't have the authority to do anything about any of that. The council does. I don't know if all the council does or not. But our legislators are coming next week, and I think that is something that needs to be done sooner rather than later, and
Let me ask a basic question. Since our charter was ratified by the state, would that not have ratified our section that deals with cases going to the municipal court on appeal from
I think the judge doesn't think so. I mean, I think that's really what the answer is. I think the judge doesn't believe that he has that authority. You know, there's ratification, but then there's also the limits of what any charter can contain. And I think what the judge indicated, and I just saw this today, so I've only read the decision through quickly, but my sense, and I want to make clear that I don't believe it's an unwinding of the charter complaint process as a whole. I think that the judge only was saying that he didn't have authority under a very specific type of charter complaint, which is against the council, because the council has appointed the judge, and so therefore the judge has an inherent conflict, and there's no way to appoint a special master, or there's no deferral to a separate justice. There's other issues. So, my read of this is that was the very limited conflict that he was identifying. That
I thought it was sort of twofold. I thought one was the fact that the enabling dealt with housing and that kind of thing. It did not anticipate the municipal court. But then also the issue of, since the town council appoints him, he has an inherent. And I will say, the Charter Review Commission, one of their proposals was, that never made it to the ballot, was to have the municipal court judge be elected, which would remove that.
Right, and so I guess my point is that I don't think that his decision, as may have been reported, eviscerates the Tiverton charter complaint process. I think if there was a complaint against a town official, a town administrative official, that could still go forward and it could go to the court. But it's when it's against the council that you have the issues, because he has that inherent conflict. That was what I took from, again, a very quick read of this.
Yeah, I have to admit, I read the same thing that Councilor Driggs read, that he's got two issues, and one is that the enabling legislation doesn't, forget whether it's against the council or not, but the enabling legislation doesn't allow him to take this on. And so, on the other hand, the state, as it was mentioned, has ratified our charter, and that's in our charter. So, I mean, there's a conflict there. And the other thing is, and I don't really understand this, but I will say this, including with this same judge who some number of years ago, when they were formerly our municipal judge, heard a charter complaint against the council. This same judge did. So it's all a little confusing here as to what happens. But under the point that Mrs. Mello was making, which is that if the municipal court judge isn't enabled under the enabling legislation to hear this charter complaint, there are other things that they're hearing that they're not enabled to hear. So we need to get to the bottom of this pretty darn quickly.
Here's where I'm coming down under the enabling statute, which I believe is 45-234, and stop me if we're going afield of an announcements agenda item. But it says the court can hear and determine causes involving a violation of any ordinance. So it seems to me a quick remedy would be to pass an ordinance that accepts the charter complaint process. And then we've made that an ordinance, and he can hear it.
Oh. Yeah.
Is that too cute?
Gio, would you like to study this and
Well, no,
get back to us?
I would, but
Bring
I don't mean to drag it out, but I do think it's helpful to talk this through, because this is fascinating new engagement that I have here, and I'm covering new ground every meeting I come to, and this is no different. This is. I think it's worth understanding the perspective of the council here, so that I know where to look, beyond just this decision. So if I could, if you could amuse me for just a few minutes longer.
Understanding that, this might actually take some research. I mean.
No, I believe it will. I just want to make sure I don't go down one path with the research and come back and find that you had a different perspective, and that's really what I'm trying to just get the sense of the council as to where the flaws are here. So I in terms of Councilor Katz's question, I mean, I don't see how the charter process isn't an ordinance, right?
That was my thinking too.
Yeah, so I think you're already there. I don't think that solves it. I think.
Why can't he hear it?
Yeah. I don't know why he can't hear it, to tell you the truth.
Well, it was adopted by the council in the charter.
That's why I'm surprised.
But why don't we give the solicitor some time to formulate a legal theory about why this particular charter complaint caused a problem and what could be remedied. And again, to address, I know Mr. Burke has suggested that various council members and the solicitor should recuse, but it seems to me that this is a generalized problem, a deficiency with the charter or the court that we're trying to remedy.
And that's really what I wanted to get on the record here, because I can come back and suggest solutions sort of in theory, but again, as a practical matter, I'm not sure how or whether the full council should vote on a solution that involves something that requires a council vote, like an ordinance.
They
Because
probably shouldn't,
but then you can't pass it, right? Then
You can't
you
pass
have, so now you're in this limbo until 2 years from now, or whatever that point may be, right? So it's a very fascinating question, and I don't, short of the state legislature
I didn't ask to be a
imposing a
defendant.
solution on the town, either by authorizing this type of complaint and providing either a waiver of conflict or some alternative method for the judge to hand it off to somebody who is not conflicted. Well, I'm not sure what the or would be, but I think that you know, something, because of the specifics of this, I don't know how you engage a solution, even if you come up with
I
one.
mean, it is possible, and I do think that the Ethics Commission, for example, does have a process when there is something like this. I can't remember what it's called, but something expediency. They do have a process whereby things can be enacted that are critical when there's an issue of a quorum. So, I mean, potentially there's a way around, there is a solution to this. But I think that, from my perspective, I'm, even more than the charter complaint, worried that just opening up this can of worms, as far as what the municipal court judge can hear, is even more troubling. And I think we need to get that
This
resolved.
sounds, isn't this, I don't mean this in a harsh way, but Michael Burke was the plaintiff, and he's actually been the one who's been told, I don't have the standing to hear it. Isn't it sort of for him to find?
No.
Well, but I think that's accurate in a sense, that I don't think the clerk has. I think the clerk has now been tossed back a hot potato that has no other oven to go to, right? So if Mr. Burke feels like he's been left with no process, no due process, or feels that the judge improperly interpreted the state law and the authorizations of the municipal court under state law, then he would have to, I guess, I don't think there's a straight appellate route for him to take, but if he could convince a judge in some higher court in Rhode Island that he's been left without a solution to a violation of his rights, then that court could, in theory, impose a solution on the town more quickly than the legislature ever could.
But isn't it the town's responsibility to find a solution also?
No,
Well, no, I'm just asking, I don't want to argue.
It's not the town's responsibility to find a solution for Mr. Burke in the specific case
But
that he's
it's
presented.
specific
But
to this
generally
problem.
speaking, yeah, the judge is pointing out something that's very flawed in your town charter.
Right,
I think that's
right.
well within
Which is why
your responsibilities.
I question the
The
necessity of
ordinance.
anybody recusing from that discussion, because as a generalized, I mean, the Code of Ethics is clear that if you're ruling on something that affects everybody who is similarly situated, you're not conflicted out. So we're not prevented from fixing a deficiency in the process because, and especially because fixing that deficiency puts us at a liability. So-
To allow it to go forward, right? Yeah, I
Right,
guess that
so-
would be the
so-
case, but I.
mean, So we'd be fixing it in order for somebody to go forward with a complaint against it.
But
which
we
seems
do have an
a very
elected
strange-
judge in town.
Well, that's
So
that's
can
part
he
two.
hear it?
Well, that's,
There's no
there's no
authority.
provision for it.
No, there is, in the charter, it says
Yeah.
where the municipal court judge must recuse from a complaint, the probate judge will hear
Yes, it does. And that has happened
It's not
before,
gonna make
and that
any
has happened before.
It's not gonna make the Enabling Act change.
No, but what I'm saying, isn't that a solution to Mr. Burke, that the
No.
probate judge can hear it?
Well,
that's-
then,
If the charter provision itself is not legal, which is the municipal court's ruling, then it stops short of going to the probate judge. So there are
Well-
two separate.
well, again, then
problems.
Mr. Burke could file a motion in the municipal court to reconsider and suggest that as a legal option.
But
Are we running into problems because we haven't really detailed what we're talking about here on the agenda?
Well, I don't think it's on the agenda, I think.
It isn't. That's what
No,
I'm
we have
saying.
to kind of stop.
Yeah, I mean, there's no decision being made here. I understand that this was not intended to be a big part of the agenda, but I think this, without, whether it's any of us here, we can't go forward with this and advise you without understanding what the sense of the council is. So I appreciate your taking the time.
Discussion only.
And it certainly is for discussion only, so it's not inappropriate
Right.
in that sense.
Sounds like this needs a lot of research.
Okay,
By
so
Michael Burke.
that brings us to executive session, and it's only 9:07 by my watch.
I,
Means we're setting ourselves up for a fall Monday when we're gonna have to be here all night. just
Would
to
you
make
like me
up
to-
for all this goodness. So, a motion to go to executive session.
I'd like to make a motion to go into executive session, Town Administrator 42-46-582, collective bargaining, IAFF.
Second.
Go ahead.
Yes.
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 Yes?
Yes, yes.
I'd like to make another motion for Town Administrator 42-46-582, litigation, Monroe.
Second. Yes.
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 Yes?
Yes. Yes.
I'd like to make a motion to go into executive session, Town Solicitor 42-46-582, litigation, Faulkner v. Tiverton.
Second. Yes.
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 Yes?
Yes.
And to remain
I'd
there.
like to make a motion to go into executive session, Councilor DiMederos 42-46-5A1, Town Administrator Performance Evaluation, notice given.
Second. Yes.
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 Yes?
We're in executive.
And we are now in
Go have a
executive session.
cigarette.